All right, welcome in. Cube Show Podcast, college football podcast. It usually comes to you on Sundays. Excited to sort of continue our guest series as we head into the season. Solid Verbal has been one of my go-to podcasts for a long time. As just a college football fan, and Dan Rubenstein of the Solid Verbal going to join us today. Some big picture items all around college football, a little bit of a season preview from different angles around college football. As you know, each and every week, we're brought to you by Pickles, wickedly delicious. We always have them at the house. We always snack on them. They are fantastic. We love Wickles Pickles. At Wickles Pickles on Instagram, go check out some of their recipes, different things that they do with them, different things they use them for. You're going to love them. They are fantastic. They sponsor the show, so please support them. WicklesPickles.com. If you want to order some, have them drop ship to you, they can do that. And you can pick up some of the gear right there for Wickles Pickles if you want to. So not going to waste any more of your time. Fall camp is getting underway. So when we come back next week, it'll be a little bit more of what's been happening in pads, talk about maybe some possible injuries, some depth charts, guys that are maybe surprising some folks. We'll have those conversations around camp with a lot of different coaches. But for this week, it's Dan Rubenstein of the Solid Verbal Podcast. Dan Rubenstein of the Solid Verbal going to join us today. I don't have the applause meter like you guys do when somebody else hops on. But maybe we'll try to get the sound effect loaded in there. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. It's always great being here. It's always great talking to you in any form. Is it fair to say you are the most important pickle-sponsored college football podcaster in America?
I mean, I think so.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. If we need to send you some Wickles Pickles, have you had Wickles Pickles before?
I haven't, and it would be the honor of a lifetime.
Okay. We're going to make that happen. We're going to get you some. And they're different, they're unique, but they're lovely. You'll enjoy.
Can't wait.
Those. But yeah, I like to think so. Hey, if I'm the most important anything, we'll take that because that's a big win. Let's start not just big picture, massive picture. There are so many different things about this college football season that we're all looking forward to. What is the most unique to you in that you're intrigued by it because you don't know exactly how it's going to go? It can be big, small, a lot of teams, one team. What's the one thing that you say, you know what, I have no idea how that's going to go, and I can't wait to see how it plays out?
So in terms of pure weird, it's probably the Bay Area teams playing in the ACC, right?
Yeah.
That Stanford and Cal, who could not be more West Coast, right? In the Bay Area, and it's Stanford and the tree, and it's wacky, and Cal and the hills, outside of San Francisco and Oakland, and they're going to play like Syracuse and NC State and Clemson and Wake Forest and vice versa. They're going to travel out west, and not like in a random one-off or home and home situation, but in a, no, this is the reality of college football kind of way in 2024. So from pure weird that we have to accept that as normal, because like with the West Coast teams that have played in Rose Bowls against Michigan and Ohio State with Oregon and SC, you're like, there's some familiarity there.
Sure.
With Texas and Oklahoma, they've played SEC teams a lot. This one is different and weird. And that is the one that, like, when you explain to somebody that doesn't pay close attention to the sport that that's the new reality, they're like, hold on, let me get this straight. That's my answer for that.
It is. I like how you sort of identify the teams too, because Stanford, probably right there with UCLA, is like, we are the Olympic sport kings.
Yeah.
And no one is close to us. Cal, kind of like, we're going to go live in trees, so you can't add it onto our stadium. So just like, don't even think about doing that. Yeah, that's going to be intriguing to see. One thing that Realignment has done for me, Dan, has made it almost impossible. And I feel like we used to go into almost every college football season saying either that team or one of those two or three teams is going to be the best group of 5 team in America, and whatever we're calling them now, but just the non-elite conference teams. I feel like I have a hunch of one or two that might be really good. Do we know? Is it clear cut of it's going to be that team, this team, even one of 3 or 4 teams who's going to be that team that maybe finds their way into the playoff this year?
Yeah, well, Liberty's the obvious one just because of what they bring back and how they were last year in the conference they play in. And so I know a lot of people are penciling in Liberty once again to be that representative. And we'll see. Obviously, Conference USA isn't the most powerful of the G5 conferences. But yeah, it is strange because, right, Boise State has a new head coach. Fresno State lost Jeff Tedford like 2.5 weeks ago. And we don't know what they're going to look like exactly in tight games and 50-50 moments. Tulane was that school in that conversation. They move on to a new coach. And so at the top, there are schools who have won a ton of games, like, San Diego State. They move on to a new coach post Brady Hogan and Sean Lewis. And so we really don't have that answer. James Madison was that team. They lose their coach, right? So I think it makes actually the idea of following the American, following the Sun Belt, following the Mountain West, like that much more intriguing, because we have big name coaches who've been at big places, right? Arkansas State is on the come up right now with Butch. And you're just like, yeah, he has won at a lot of places. He has struggled some at a specific place. But when you have the recognizable names at these big G5 places, I think it makes for like a pretty exciting season and narrative.
Well, like you said, that trickle-down effect, too. Obviously, John Summerall going to Tulane, new head coach, but then now Troy, who has been dominant, they also are going to have a new head coach this year. So that one makes you kind of second-guess it just a little bit.
Sure.
It's odd. And, one thing that McElroy and I have we kind of stumbled upon this around media days, and we've begun to really dive into it a little bit more. And not from the exact record perspective, but I really do wonder with Liberty how much the schedule is going to play against them. But some of the other teams, like we pointed out, when you take, let's say, a Penn State, or when you take Missouri or Ole Miss, Dan, it feels like everybody nationally is like 10-2, you're in. 10-2, you're in.
Yeah.
There are a couple schedules like those three that I just threw out. Especially if it's the two most difficult teams on the schedule, there are going to be people at the end of the year saying, okay, who's your best win? I know you're 10-2 in the SEC or the Big Ten, but where's your resume to, like, where's your brag book, so to speak? Like, I want to see what you're coming to the table with to tell me this is definitively why you deserve to be in. How much fun, how crazy is it going to be at the end of the year? First off, we got to rewire ourselves that 3-loss teams are not the worst teams. 2-loss teams can still be really good teams. And just finding out which teams are going to end up being in this playoff.
I think we have to look at what teams look like in November versus September. And we have to sort of allow ourselves the grace to say that seasons are living, breathing things, and that what a team looks like in week 2 isn't what they look like in week 11. Are we going to do that collectively as a college football universe? Of course not. We are emotional, and we're going to make cases based on the teams we root for or the conferences we'd love to see in there. But yeah, I think that's part of it. It's not necessarily how you start, which I think is part of it, like who you schedule. And it's nice. Like, for instance, we're doing the SEC preview right now on the Solid Verbal, and it's just like, it's really nice to see all of these SEC teams scheduling legitimate Power 5 competition early on, knowing that if we do end up 9-3, yes, we went to Wisconsin and won, or we went to Vegas and beat USC, or that we opened the season against Clemson. Like that is definitely going to be an element of all of this. And even in the case of Liberty, like they're playing App State this year. App State is playing Clemson this year. So if App State and Liberty and whoever else is in that conversation, we should reward App State even if they lose 30-27 to Clemson. Like that's great. That's great that they were competitive on that level, that they scheduled Clemson. And it's great that Liberty scheduled App State, so they're not just buzzing through Conference USA. So yeah, I think we are going to have to rewire. We are going to have to look at, and even if we're not saying, oh, okay, we're not going to look at like margin of victory per se, we should look at strength of performance on some level. We should say like, look at what they've done against teams with winning records. Look at what they've done against bowl teams. Look at what they've done against other teams vaguely in the top 20-ish in the country, that they didn't just sneak by 13-10 and look ugly doing it. And we should reward teams that play strong football, especially in that like back 6 part of the season.
We get to that final leg. Let's just say the last 3 weeks of the regular season. How many teams are we talking about that you believe? And obviously that can be a little bit different because conference championship game upset, whatever it is. But where would you draw the line that this is how many teams we're most likely going to be able to make a real case about to potentially end up in this year's college football playoff?
I think we're going to be in that like 15, 16 team conversation, come mid-November or something like that. And you're going to know based on like what has happened earlier on in the season, even if it's midway through the season, that if a team is, 7-3 or something like that, and in that conversation, but that one of those 3 losses was to like a pretty bad team and it was by a couple touchdowns. Like I think we can eliminate, certain teams based on performance specific metrics. And so, yeah, I think we're going to get in that 15, 16 team zone. I know a lot of people are optimistic that it's going to be over 20 we're going to be talking about, but realistically, with those matchups near the end of the season, it's all going to sort itself out and we'll have, 13 or 14 teams in that conversation. And that's when I think we're going to get some really ugly like SEC versus Big 10 versus Big 12 versus ACC conversations. And we're going to start, looking at the margins of schedules and, you're like, well, the 7-3 in the ACC, the same as 7-3 in the Big Ten. And we have no idea, no way of knowing that. But yeah, I think we're going to get to that zone where we're going to have to vaguely have conversations like, let's be serious. This team is not, built to win a playoff game or compete in a playoff. And like, how do you do that in a way that's like not mean-spirited? I'm not sure.
No, I don't know if there is a way.
Yeah.
But that also brings up an interesting point that I've been thinking about when we talk about rewiring our brains, viewing things in a little bit of a different lens. Conference championship game losers. How different is that going to be? Because we've just thrown them out with the bathwater for a while. Kind of like,
right.
You were on the brink of playing for a national title, and now you're going to the Liberty Bowl. Have fun. How different could that be? Will that be, do you think, not just this year, but kind of moving forward?
It's an interesting question, especially if you go into a game undefeated and you don't necessarily need that game. I mean, look, you'd like to win the conference and get that bye, but there's different calculus involved. I don't think teams are going to tank to rest or anything like that, but it certainly for some teams won't be the end of the world. If
like Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey probably not playing in Atlanta last year. Like
right, exactly
you're
right.
Cool saying, no, we're fine. Yeah.
And it's a long-term way of thinking, and it's weird. And I don't know if we're going to actually have a situation where, I mean, these guys are, Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers are who they are because they're crazy competitors doing whatever it takes to succeed and get on the field. So I don't know if you can even convince them to stay off the field. But yeah, we're going to have situations where teams are not going to feel deflated. Teams are going to go into these games with a certain amount of calculus about what the results seem to be. But you're also going to have situations where, and we have this in college basketball, where a team might end up in that game like Oklahoma State last year, right? In the Big 12 against Texas, where they're clearly not going to make the playoff. They end up there, they win a couple tiebreakers, a really great season for Oklahoma State. But suddenly you can vault into the playoff even as like the 23rd best team because you're winning a power conference. And so you're going to get the other side of things with just like, well, we got into this game, we're 8-3 and it's not looking good, or 8-4, let's say. But here we are. We might as well take advantage and everything, throw everything at the wall.
I want to go back to where you brought up some of those early non-conference SEC games. And one game that I am extremely excited about is Texas-Michigan for a lot of different reasons. I actually think that they contrast each other's strengths and weaknesses very well. This Texas offensive line is supposed to be really good. Well, guess what? You're going to find out because that's the best front in college football. Is Michigan going to be able to throw the ball? Well, that secondary was bad last year. So is the secondary better? Is Michigan's passing game going to be inept? Is it going to be a positive for that team? And then obviously with the 2 D tackles that are gone from Texas and Michigan rebuilding the offensive line a little bit, like who sort of wins that battle? All that being said, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on Texas. I don't have much of a grasp on Michigan at all. What are your expectations for Michigan going into this season?
I don't think they're going to trust the passing game as much. And we saw last year when J.J. McCarthy was a little beat up at the end of the year. I think he threw the ball 9 times against Penn State. But if Michigan needs to pass the ball, and they were able to get some big passes in the Rose Bowl, they've been able to. And so we think it's going to be Alex Orji, who, like J.J. McCarthy, can move and throw, but it's just greener. Michigan was led by its offensive line last year. They have all these experienced dudes, older guys, and I generally trust offensive lines when the head coach has that offensive line background. So I think they'll be fine. I just don't know if they're going to be like Joe Moore championship caliber quite yet because of all the experience. And, Michigan was able to plug a couple holes with a Stanford guy and an ASU guy a couple of years ago. But you're right about strength on strength with Texas's offensive line against Michigan's front. Michigan's own secondary, I think weirdly might be improved this year. They bring in a couple transfers. Young guys who were really good spelling and in rotation now step up to starting roles. I think Michigan will be better, and everybody knows this who's listening. I think Michigan will be better getting after the passer. And there's no better way to cover up for a green or a so-so secondary than getting after the quarterback super well. And so they bring in the UTSA transfer. They've recruited pretty well on the edge. Colin Simmons was a freshman last year. So I think I think he was a freshman last year. He's an incoming freshman. They have guys there. And so that to me is going to be the X factor this year for the Texas season is how well do they get after the quarterback? You mentioned the defensive tackles. They have rotation guys back. They were sort of desperate to sort of build depth in the portal, and I'm not sure the quality that's there right now. But that to me is, what Texas looks like coming off of the edge. I think that'll be a huge, that edge against, the edge of Michigan's offensive line. I think
it's going to be fun. Pretty good group of tight ends from Michigan to help out there as well. So let's stay in the Big Ten. An obvious one that I had to get to is Oregon now coming into the Big Ten. There's so much to like. For me, there seems to be just a little something of keeping me from putting them. I have Georgia and Ohio State in kind of their own stratosphere. Tier 2, I think, is a lot bigger, and it's when you start talking about teams probably like Oregon, Texas, Alabama, maybe an Ole Miss is going to be in that discussion. Where do you sort of view Oregon? Because nobody seems to have we were at SEC Media Days, Dan, and people really said, even the coaches, getting through this grind physically is going to be tough. It's just going to be different. We don't hear about that with Oregon going into the Big Ten as much, and the style of play will be a little bit different, more consistently. But the defensive lines in the Pac-12 last year were pretty good collectively, probably better than they've been in some time. And then, of course, I think it helps that you've had multiple coaches consecutively that kind of wanted to build inside out, so to speak. Maybe it's that Dylan Gabriel is just a super stat patter, and I don't really trust him going to win a national title. I can't put my finger on what's holding me back from saying Oregon is right there with Georgia and Ohio State, but for some reason I'm not. What are your expectations for the Oregon Ducks year one of the Big Ten?
Huge expectations because not just how they're built, but who they play against and the questions that those teams have. You want somebody to be able to score 30, 35 points to beat Oregon. Ohio State can do that. We think Michigan at its peak will be able to do that probably against most teams. And otherwise on this schedule, you have, Boise State and Oregon State early, which will not be as tough as the toughest versions of those teams that Oregon has faced. And then throughout the season, the quarterbacks they face, I think, are going to struggle a lot with what Oregon's going to look like up front. The offensive lines are going to look like what their opponents' offensive lines are going to look like against Oregon's defensive front. I think they're going to struggle. I think Oregon is recruited crazy well there. They replaced basically their entire secondary, but with high-level dudes, one of whom gave Oregon trouble from Washington. And Dan Lanning is something like 22-5 in 2 years, and he's lost to Washington 3 times, and Oregon State. I'm blanking on anything else I've missed, but they're built for this. They're built for this. They've had continuity for the first time in a long time, keeping Will Stein as offensive coordinator. They had the best offense in the country last year in terms of points per drive, and they get deeper on defense. They're a little bit thin at linebacker, but the starters are good. They add Evan Stewart. They bring back their starting tight end. They're deep at receiver. They're deep at running back. Their tackles are both back. I think Oregon is just more complete. They have more ways to win than everybody on their schedule outside of Ohio State, which is why I think I have them in that conversation, or I think they're squarely perhaps in that second tier nationally.
When you look at the Big Ten, does it stop with those three, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon? Does Penn State get in? And is there a team after Penn State that you think is realistically knocking on that playoff door this year?
Yeah, Penn State is sort of in that gray area. We need to see a pretty big improvement from Drew Aller in this offense, new offensive coordinator, which is nice. Hopefully better playmakers at receiver, and he gets protected a little bit better. Penn State should have a killer defense. So all they really need is pretty good quarterback play. I think their defense is going to be quite good this year, especially, some of the pieces they're moving around. I really like Penn State. You want to see more pop from that offense. That's the only thing that we're missing from seeing Penn State take that next step. So I would have Oregon, Ohio State, and then some combination of probably Michigan and Penn State, but I'm not entirely convinced, both because same reason, quarterback play from both of those teams. So in terms of anybody else in that conference, we need to see it to believe it from USC, who I think they've added a couple nice pieces on defense, but I don't think they have the depth or NFL caliber talent on that defense. There's curiosities, right? We want to see what Dylan Raiola looks like with Nebraska and perhaps the Huskers having a good defense once again. But no, I think to make a playoff, even in the 12-team era, I'm always going to say it's quarterback and defense. And those are the schools that have it right now, Ohio State and Oregon.
All right, guys, I want to tell you about the Better Business Bureau. Now, they're going to be able to help your business in a lot of different ways. You need to drive traffic to your website. They're going to be able to help you with that. How about digital billboards? They can help you with that. They want to help you grow your business, do more business, and just be better. Go to bbb.org, put your zip code in at the top of the page, and that Better Business Bureau of Central and South Alabama are going to be able to help drive business to you right now. How about building a website? You need assistance with that. When you go to these garbage websites, you can tell right away, I don't want any part of that. They're going to help you clean that up, get something that's going to be attractive, appealing to your customers, and get them coming back. Incorporated locally in 1954, the Better Business Bureau, serving Central and South Alabama, serves over 4,100 accredited businesses in 50 counties with offices in Birmingham and Mobile. BBB.org. That's all you need to know. Go there, put your zip code in, see all the businesses that they work with right now, see the different things that they can do for you, from advertising, website, digital business, how you can draw more people into your company. The Better Business Bureau of Central and South Alabama, they want to help you out. Go to BBB.org today and see exactly what they can do for you. All right, Dan, so we've mentioned a couple of new coordinators. There's a new head coach at one school, and normally when that happens, and the team that we just referenced has seen it a couple of times over the last decade, no matter who it is, you'll usually say, well, it's a year to figure it out, or, oh, it's a little bit of a turnover. The system's going to change. There seems to be almost none of that with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. I love Kalen. I think he's fantastic. Had him a couple of times at Washington. Aaron and I took the Joe Moore Award out there and got to talk to him a bunch then. He is an amazing human, first and foremost, but he's a great football coach, and he's won everywhere he's been, and he's won different ways when he's been different places. But this is still Alabama, and the standard was out of this world high. And it felt a little bit different. Even though they got to the playoff last year, it did feel a little bit different as just how that season went. It wasn't murder ball. It wasn't bludgeon everybody. It wasn't, hey, these teams just can't keep up with us. And now some of the other positions that seem like they have been utterly dominant in the last decade, receiver, defensive line, kind of don't feel the same. But there's this weird benefit of the doubt that they're getting nationally from a lot of people. And I think they probably will make the playoff. I think they have a chance to make a playoff run if some things go their way. But should we be questioning Alabama just a little bit more?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I think people want to. People are rightfully complimentary of Kalen DeBoer's record because he just exclusively wins. He doesn't always win pretty. He doesn't always win ugly. He exclusively wins. Winning is a skill. If the score is 13-all or something late in the fourth, and Kalen DeBoer is on one sideline, you feel pretty good about him. That said, he is taking in players that he didn't recruit for the most part on this Alabama roster. And at Washington, it was kind of the same thing. Brought in Penix, which was obviously enormous, but top to bottom, that wasn't his roster. So this season, the expectation with Alabama should be good football, not losing a game in a stupid way, not losing to a clearly inferior team. And like you've talked about, like the calculus of going 9-3 or 10-2 and that being acceptable is going to have to sink in a little bit with perhaps the Alabama fan base more than any other, because sometimes it takes time. And with the back half of their schedule, I think it's Oklahoma and Mizzou, LSU, obviously Auburn. Yeah. Like it's a gauntlet, but they have some time to figure it out. I'm not super crazy about Wisconsin in this moment early on. I think they should be okay. And it's how comfortable is Jalen Milroe in a new offense? How, Kalen DeBoer's record with quarterbacks is sterling, but you're right. They're not stacked at obviously proven receivers like they've been. Kobe Prentice and a bunch of hopefully good young players is their receiving core. Two good running backs. Offensive line should be very good. But again, the defensive line is, well, who's coming off of the edge successfully? What does the depth look like in the secondary? What does it look like at linebacker? Like there's star potential there, but it wasn't the year over year thing we were used to with Nick Saban. So I think they're going to win. I think they're going to lose in a new way, because how can you not with a new coach? But ultimately, like you have to gamble on roster construction and a proven winner. And so, yeah, they could go 9-3. They could go 10-2. But the expectation that they're going to score 45 a game and they're going to hold everybody to 13 or 17 a game. I think let's give Kalen DeBoer a little bit of time to sort of figure out what he has.
I look how you said roster construction there, because it essentially kind of what it's become now. It's not just recruit and then hold on. And if a guy leaves early for the draft, it's going to be a ding. It's guys in, out constantly. And maybe the master of that has been Lane Kiffin. And it seems like we've gotten past this hurdle of, he's built it through the portal, so there won't be enough continuity or chemistry. They're not going to ultimately be able to win really big. We've kind of gotten past that, or at least a lot of people have. But similar to Oregon, there seems to be something there that people are just kind of like, there's a lot to like, but I don't know if I'm going to fall in love with it just yet. I think for me, it would probably be physicality, depth. I mean, you're going to get into some of those grinded out games late in the season. Are they ready for that? Seems like they're doing a better job of trying to build to be that, but I don't know if they are. All the flash will be there. There's zero doubt about that. And like we talked on last week's show, some guys that we may be forgetting about in the portal, like a Juice Wells, I think people forget just how friggin' good that guy was a couple of years ago. I thought he was the best receiver in the league coming into last year. If he's even close to that, I mean, this thing could be totally different than even what we're imagining. Is national championship the ceiling for Ole Miss this year?
They're a playoff team. I don't know if national championship is the ceiling. I still have my questions, and you mentioned physicality. Like that offensive line at times was really rough last year. And if there's a single position that I don't trust the portal to fully help you with, like if you need 3 dudes and you're looking to the portal for help, like that is a singular group when it's operating correctly. And so, we've seen it with Colorado, trying to sort of rebuild a dysfunctional offensive line through the portal. And I think Ole Miss has a better shot of doing it because I think Lane is excellent at covering up weakness with smart scheme and with speed. But yeah, my question with Ole Miss right now is both the offensive line. Jackson Dart played through a lot of injury last year, but like Ole Miss did not look good against Alabama and Georgia. Like they just did not look like they belonged on that same field, especially against Georgia. And so I think they're good enough to beat the teams they should beat. I appreciate what they've added on defense, especially up front, along the edge. But it's like, when are we going to see like a Jackson Dart all SEC type game against a great team? Like, when are we going to see like Jackson Dart in a losing effort, even in a losing effort, 330 and 3 touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
And so that to me is what's holding me back about full enthusiasm about Ole Miss. Their schedule's pretty great. Their schedule's great, so they should end up with a really nice record. They should be in that playoff conversation. But what do they look like, even in losses or even against the best teams on their schedule? That'll be the difference maker from where they were last year.
You're not counting like the 700 yards against LSU last year?
No, I mean, you and I.
That was a little bit of a different one.
You and I went for 130 out wide against the LSU defense last year. And I've got a bump shoulder. My knee's not the best. We still could have done that against LSU's secondary this last year.
Okay, one more from the SEC. I feel like Georgia, Bama, Texas, and then your maybes in that category are going to be Missouri, Ole Miss. So let's remove those.
Okay.
I feel like there's this log jam of teams, Auburn, Texas A&M. I think Tennessee's a little bit above that.
I do
have
too.
them a little bit above that at least. I think Oklahoma's kind of in that category of, and they're kind of for different ways. Like Oklahoma, ton of star power potential. Like they have superstars, but the team I have some concerns about. Auburn seems to have some real upside, but maybe depth and just being solid everywhere you're a little bit concerned about. Tennessee, that defensive line, I had them as the best defensive line in the SEC, but you do have a new quarterback and you have some depth concerns. Like I think Tennessee is one injury away at multiple positions, maybe more positions than any other team, of that being a massive hit to that football team. Who can separate, like A&M, you said it, that defensive line can rip. Connor Wigman, you got people saying he's going to be the first pick in the draft.
Really? Okay.
And we love Elko. He's fantastic, but I don't know if they go to 9 or 10 of that middle bar in the SEC. Who do you see kind of maybe separating a little bit more than any of the others?
Okay, so if we're not including Tennessee in the conversation, just because, again, quarterback and defense, the upside of Nico back there in a perfect system, and they should be pretty good at running back. They look deep at receiver, especially with the Tulane transfer coming in. I really like where Tennessee is at in terms of mostly the roster construction. We'll see on sort of a rebuilt secondary. But I don't know. I think A&M is going to be nice. And I know that this is a classic August conversation, feeling optimistic about A&M. I think Mike Elko is just, again, it's sort of in that Kalen DeBoer mode where he's a ball coach who wins and like goes to Duke, a place that is not advantaged in a football way. And in his first season, they were like a gust of wind away from winning 10, 11 games, right? They lost a couple close and then won a bunch more. And so when you couple that with his experience there, with who they bring back, with who they brought in the portal, I think the offensive line will be improved. You mentioned the defensive line. I think they've got guys on both sides of the ball. I like Ruben Owens a bunch. He's going to be just a lot to bring down for everybody in this conference. And so if Moose Muhammad and the receivers like show pop, and then you have the biggest asterisk of all, which is just Connor Wegman health. If he's healthy with a winning coach, with what I think is going to be a good defense, even though I'm not like terribly in love with Jay Bateman's track record. I don't know. I think A&M's in a really nice spot, and they should be more enjoyable than they've been these past few years. Like, I don't think they're going to lose games they shouldn't often at all in the way that they have before. So that to me is a separator in a conference where, and you mentioned all these different teams. You're just like, we talk about this on our SEC preview series. You're just like, how many teams? 10, 11 teams are just like hoping for the best at quarterback, but they really can't point to much yet. And so we know the best of Connor Wegman's really interesting, but the question is just staying on the field and getting a little luckier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with A&M, one thing that you will see is just the operation of all of it is going to be better. Alignment, assignment, effort, those kind of things, stupid penalties. I think Colin Klein, the design of the offense, how it's delivered is going to be different enough to give them some advantages. And then defensively, just not having to rely on the defensive line all the time, which last year that was kind of enough a lot of the times because they were that good. But
and they had Edrin Cooper back there and no longer there now. But like I still am a believer in just like everybody being on the same page. As you said, alignment is going to be, they're not going to lose to App State anymore. They're just not.
I asked, it's funny that you said that, like why these kids would do that. I asked Greg Sankey at Media Days, I said, is it weird that feels like the last 5 years, we've gone from these just like ruthless assassin, train killer, like programmed T2000 head coaches to like all these likable, lovable guys. I mean, it's like Pittman, Elko, DeBoer, Beamer. They're all just like lovable, likable. Like, you still have Kirby out there who's like, I mean, he's still playing Assassin's Creed.
Sure.
He's the ultimate just, we will go until we literally cannot go anymore. But is that kind of where college football is headed a little bit? That sort of the more likable, lovable head coach is bound to be more successful?
I think on a certain level, yeah, because of where we are as a sport, because the job of now head coach, right? You're not just managing a staff. You're not just, sort of employing a vision for what offense or defense is going to look like. You're not just recruiting. You're constantly trying to build a place that people want to stay at, right? That like, because of the portal, you have to sort of build and foster an environment that, and I'm not talking about like kumbaya, but like you can't be a piece of garbage to people and get away with it, because not only are people going to leave, right? People are going to find out about you other places, and you are not going to get the transfers in. So you are going to see coaches who, and I think this is one of, I pay more attention to Oregon than any other program, but the great thing Dan Lanning has done is they've broadcast that there is fellowship, there's brotherhood, all this off-field stuff and these getaways and everything like that. And look, everything is recruiting in college football, as we all know, but you are going to see more of that because you just can't get away with having a miserable locker room and winning and sustaining that for years and years to come, unless you're Kirby and winning national championships. But anything short of that, no, you have to build a place people want to go to and stay at.
It's so interesting, Dan, because I've had a couple conversations around that recently. One, talking about just I've had two head coaches tell me this offseason that are very sort of philosophical, not in their football ways, but in locker room leadership, character building. And they've told me straight up, like, we're not extinguishing that, but it is not a primary focus anymore because we're bringing guys in and we're hammering it for 2 years and they're gone. Right. Or we're getting a guy in who has a year and there's just not enough time to give him all of that. So like, we're getting back to X's and O's, which they don't ever totally get away from, but the emphasis is sliding and changing a little bit. And then sort of the recruiting pitch that you talked about, like the money has evened out at so many places. We're kind of getting back to like what you were saying. Do you like it here? Do you like being around these people? And guess what? Coaches that are actually good at recruiting again and not just saying, here's the blank check. How much do you want to come play for us?
Yeah. And they can use the transfers as a model, right? If, again, I'll go back to Oregon, but any of these schools, right? If you are a class of 2027 quarterback and Bo Nix is on campus telling you how great it was to be in Eugene, Oregon, coming from the South, or, take whatever example, like how great it is for Will Howard to be in Columbus, Ohio, coming from somewhere else in the country. Like that's going to resonate on the trail that like these guys are saying like, yes, he had my back in this way. I have lasting friendships with my offensive linemen in this way because of the way that this program operates. And so, it's paying everything forward, even if a guy's only there for a year. You want to build that reputation for your school.
All right, two more quick ones. I have Utah winning the Big 12. A lot of other people would say Oklahoma State. Do you believe a team not named Utah or Oklahoma State can win the Big 12 this year?
Yes. I think Kansas State can be that team that wins the Big 12. Again, it's another one of those upside quarterbacks in Avery Johnson, who has the best of him is like folk hero status, that he is that dual threat, that he's accurate, that he, just wins games and finds first downs and touchdowns out of nowhere. So yeah, Kansas State has that combination to me of quarterback and defense. We'll see on pop. We'll see on receiver pop or tight end, anything like that. That to me is the question. I don't think it's as important in this year's Big 12. We'll see on the defenses. There are some really strong ones. But yeah, Kansas State would be that other team. Curious to see what Oklahoma State's defense looks like. I think, when Utah is starting a 37-year-old quarterback, you have to at least give them a little bit of shine because they have won. The only difference with Utah is they haven't really won outside of the Pac-12 in any sort of appreciable way, whether it's bowl games, non-conference. Like that's the one thing where you're just like, how quickly can they adjust to a full new schedule without having, the previous success?
It's interesting. I had a note on that written down for this morning's radio show. I think I still might have it.
They beat Florida last year. That counts.
In their first year in new conferences, of which they have played in many. Yeah. 40, 17, and 4 all time for Utah. So
that's pretty great.
A couple of one loss, one tie, one loss, two ties in first years of new conferences. And there's a couple conferences that they've been new in that people have never heard of back in the early 1900s. So maybe they figure it out, but I'm kind of with you. Plus Kleiman's real deal. I mean, he is absolutely the real deal. So,
but a lot of fun teams in the Big 12 this year, by the way. You'll have Colorado's offense. I think Iowa State is underrated. Both Kansas schools should be winners. Like there's good school. West Virginia should probably have another decent year.
That game against Penn State week 1 going to be massive for both of those teams. So let's finish up over in the ACC. Over 1.5 real national championship contenders in the ACC this year. Over or under?
Under. I'm under on that because, again, I'll echo myself. It's quarterback and defense. I'm not there with DJU and Florida State. I think they're going to be good. I think they're a good team. I think there's enough talent there and they've recruited well enough. They're great in the portal, but I think offensively they're going to have a passing ceiling. I think Clemson's defense is playoff caliber, but we're still TBD. They need young receivers to really blow up this offense this year. And so I don't feel like anybody, when you look at the ACC right now, is close enough to a completed product to make me feel good. So maybe, hopefully,
I'm
wrong.
Are you going 0, by the way?
0 playoff teams?
National championship caliber teams.
No, I think the upside of Clemson is interesting enough. We have a national championship head coach. We have a defense with NFL dudes, especially.
Yeah, that front will be nasty.
Dude, totally crazy. And secondary, we'll see. They lost a couple key dudes, but they need that offensive pop to come back quickly with Riley. And if it doesn't, I think they'll be good, if not really good.
Miami a maybe or yes or
Miami's offense at its best, maybe. I'm not huge on Cam Ward. I like that defensive line. I like Ruben Bain a good deal. I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be better this year. But you show me a Mario Cristobal team that doesn't lose something absurd, in week 7 or something like that. I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah, Cam Ward needs to be, I think I saw a number today, something like 46 lost fumbles in his career. That's too many. That's too many to feel good about a team winning 10 games, even with the surrounding talent, and should have a great offensive line. That right tackle is great. Maui Goa.
Yep.
But Miami, again, believe it when you see it.
The freelancing at quarterback has to sort of clean itself up a little bit. I kind of call him an and one point guard, where it's just like there's real no game plan sometimes, and it's just go do what looks cool and is fun. And that's like you said, that's not going to get you a national championship. So
you'll see like specific drives where he'll step into the pocket and nail. Last year was Josh Kelly, one of his big receivers at Wazoo. But it is he panics a little bit too quickly and then tries to figure out something to do on the run. And in an offense that should be ACC championship caliber, I don't think you can have it. You just can't.
Yep. I'm with you. Dan, great stuff. Thanks for joining us. Solid Verbal Podcast. Go check it out. You said you guys going through the SEC right now.
We are.
going to be fun. I mean, listen, I listen to you guys every week. So if you're watching this, you should go check them out as well. And I appreciate you taking some time to hop on today. What is the what has the pizza of the week been? What will be the next great pizza concoction that you come up with?
Great question. Right now I'm on a kick of, so it's like a thin New York circle, and I do roast garlic, jalapeno, and shaved red onion. That's been a really good one for me.
I'm going to tell you what I need to send you outside of Wickles Pickles, which I have seen some people put on pizza.
I've seen it too.
Some Conecuh sausage that's only made here in Alabama.
Ooh. What is it comparable to?
Pick your favorite spicy sausage.
Like an andouille, like
kind of the link sausage. Yeah, a little bit. But it's not as gritty and not as like pieced together as an andouille sausage. But it's it's amazing. And I need to send you some of that for you to put on a pizza specifically.
So I'll do a sausage, and I'd happily do the Alabama sausage, onion, and shaved garlic, and a little bit of chili oil. And I call that the Supreme Abdul-Jabbar. I'm pretty happy with it.
Do you come up with your own names for all your pizzas?
Yeah. Okay. I usually go with like 80s or 90s athletes, because I, like, you just giggled hearing that name, because it tickles people where they love it. I have a sausage, pepperoni, and I think garlic and spicy honey. That's the meat sampras. I'm all in on using I have a Long Island. It's in a square pan that I call the Joey Squarington. So that's the Oregon duck in me. But you like to have fun with these things.
We don't like, if you were to ever make a pan pizza, it could be like a pan Sewell.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm 100% stealing that.
Literally just came up with that right
pan
now.
Sewell is done. Like especially he plays for the Detroit Lions. It's Detroit pizza.
There you go.
So what is on the,
okay, Chicago, but it's good.
You're a former offensive lineman, or maybe it's like when you're a Marine, it's once a Marine, always a Marine. So you're not a former offensive lineman. What is on the pan Sewell in your eyes?
Well, here's the thing that I think with Sewell, he pretty much is knocking people down a lot. So I'm going to need something sort of spicy. Maybe go back to your jalapenos that you just had. And he's a big girthy offensive lineman, so we have to have a lot of meat. So maybe we'll go like ground beef, pepperoni, and sausage, and then we'll throw in for some kick, like some of those jalapenos with maybe like some other little kind of pepper that you wanted to throw in there, make it have a little more extra kick.
Here's what I'm thinking. I think all that is correct. How do we come up with like some sort of spicy syrup to bring it back to pancakes and an offensive lineman?
Yes.
Yes is the answer.
Yeah, we'll figure
I'll come up with something like a spicy maple syrup with some meat, because you have like sausage and maple syrup together is like a total great combination on a breakfast plate.
It's got to work on pizza. I don't know how it would.
Worth a shot. It's worth a shot.
There you go. Dan, thanks for the time. That was awesome. I appreciate you joining us. Solid Verbal Podcast. Go check that out.
I appreciate it.
All right, guys, don't forget about Blue Delta jeans, the most comfortable denim that you're ever going to put on. You see me walk around with pants on most times. It's Blue Delta jeans. Breathable, stretchy, flexible. You can dress them up, be casual, and they're custom fit for you. So you don't have to worry about being too baggy in one place, too long, not fitting you right. They are going to be custom fit for you. And they can do this digitally now. So go to bluedeltajeans.com, see exactly what they can do for you. You got kids going back to school, got some holidays coming up. Maybe there's a birthday in your life. A pair of Blue Delta jeans would be fantastic. So go to bluedeltajeans.com right now and go ahead and have a pair made out for you.